The fluorescent lights of Sterling Corp buzzed with the same sterile hum they had for the last 7 years of my life. It was the kind of hum that seeped into your bones, a constant, low-grade annoyance that mirrored the professional purgatory I found myself in. My name is Alex Vance, and my job title was Senior Report Analyst, a fancy way of saying I was the person who made sure everyone else's brilliance, or perceived brilliance, looked good on paper. I was the architect of the glossy presentations, the wordsmith who polished raw data into digestible narratives, the ghostwriter of corporate success. And for 7 years, I'd been the invisible engine that kept Sterling Corp's marketing department chugging along. I knew the spreadsheets like the back of my hand, the subtle nuances of each client's preferred pie chart aesthetic, and the exact shade of blue that made stakeholders nod along with feigned understanding. My workspace was a monument to meticulousness, color-coded folders, a precisely aligned monitor, and a desktop background that was a high-resolution image of a perfectly organized bookshelf, a silent, personal rebellion against the impending chaos. This morning, however, the hum felt different, tense, like the air before a thunderstorm. The usual pre-dawn quiet was punctuated by the frantic clicking of keyboards from the executive suite, a symphony of manufactured urgency. Something was brewing, and I could feel it in my gut, a familiar clench that always preceded a seismic shift in the office ecosystem. My supervisor, a man named Dave, who possessed the leadership qualities of a particularly lethargic sloth, had been replaced by someone new. Someone with a name that sounded like it belonged on a discount cologne bottle and a smile that was a little too wide, a little too bright. Chad Sterling, VP of Strategic Initiatives. The name itself was an exercise in corporate buzzword bingo. He'd been brought in to disrupt, to innovate, to leverage synergies, and generally make everyone else feel like they were still using dial-up internet. My first interaction with Chad was less a meeting and more an ambush. I was hunched over my desk, deep in the intricate web of the Q3 performance report for our flagship client, Zenith Innovations. This report was a beast, a culmination of months of data wrangling, campaign analysis, and predictive modeling. It was, to put it mildly, my masterpiece. I had spent weeks refining every comma, every data point, every carefully crafted sentence. I knew it inside and out. So when Chad breezed into my cubicle, radiating an aura of expensive cologne and unchecked ambition, I instinctively straightened my shoulders. He didn't bother with pleasantries. His eyes, the color of a freshly printed $50 bill, scanned my monitor with a critical, almost predatory gaze. "Alex, right?" he said, his voice smooth, like polished river stones. "Dave tells me you're the report guru. Good, because I'm about to throw a curveball your way." A curveball? In my line of work, that usually meant a last-minute request for a pie chart showing projected unicorn growth. "I'm ready, Mr. Sterling," I replied, keeping my tone professional. "Cut the Mr. Sterling. It's Chad. And this isn't about pie charts. This is about making things happen. Zenith Innovations is our golden goose. We need this Q3 report to sing." Louder, more impactfully. He leaned closer, lowering his voice conspiratorially. "I've got some ideas, some strategic edits, minor tweaks, really, to really highlight our key achievements. You know, the stuff that gets noticed, the stuff that gets us bigger budgets." He gestured towards my monitor, then with a sudden, almost aggressive motion, he snatched a red pen from my desk. My heart did a little stutter step. Red pens were a sacred object in my meticulously organized world, reserved only for dire emergencies or self-reflection. Chad, however, seemed to wield it like a weapon. He started scribbling on a printout of my report, his pen strokes bold and decisive, like he was signing a treaty that only benefited him. "See here," he jabbed at a section detailing a modest but steady increase in customer engagement. "This is too granular. We need to talk about results, not just clicks. We need to talk about revenue growth. And this section on user acquisition cost, a bit dry. Let's reframe it as strategic investment in market penetration." Sounds more executive, doesn't it? He continued to deface my carefully constructed prose, his edits a chaotic mess of underlines, question marks, and aggressively confident exclamation points. He was replacing well-researched insights with vague platitudes, turning nuanced data into hollow pronouncements. He'd rewrite a sentence explaining the precise factors contributing to a campaign's success into something like, "Our visionary leadership drove unprecedented market dominance." He was systematically draining the intelligence out of my report and replacing it with his own brand of corporate jargon, like a colonizer replacing a vibrant culture with bland beige wallpaper. And this, he pointed to a carefully analyzed trend line, "Let's just make this dip look less like a dip and more like a strategic pause for recalibration. Can you just smooth that out?" My hands clenched under my desk. Smooth that out? That dip represented a significant learning opportunity, a valuable insight into a competitor's tactical shift. To smooth it out would be to lie by omission, to present a distorted reality. It was like asking a surgeon to just smooth out a tumor. It was fundamentally unethical. "Mr. Sterling," I began, my voice tight, trying to keep the tremor out, "that dip actually indicates—" "Alex," he interrupted, his smile hardening, "I appreciate your dedication to detail. But my job is to see the big picture, to drive results. Your job is to make my vision a reality. Just make these changes by end of day. No excuses." He tossed the ink-stained report onto my desk, the red pen clattering ominously. "Don't disappoint me." He walked away as quickly as he'd arrived, leaving behind a faint scent of success and a deeply unsettling feeling in my stomach. I looked at the defaced report, the red ink bleeding into the carefully chosen font like an infection. He hadn't just edited my report, he'd assaulted it. He'd taken months of diligent work, of objective analysis, and tried to twist it into a superficial puff piece that showcased his supposed genius, not the company's actual performance. And he wanted me to be complicit in that distortion. My mind raced. I could go to Dave, but Dave was probably already polishing his resume for his next sloth-based career opportunity. I could go to HR, but HR was generally a reactive entity, more adept at handing out sympathy cards than actual solutions. And confronting Chad directly felt like trying to reason with a runaway bulldozer. But I knew one thing. I wasn't going to be the instrument of this deception. I wasn't going to be the one to present a lie to the board. I picked up the defaced report, the red ink smudging slightly under my fingertips. This wasn't just about a report anymore. This was about integrity. This was about the truth. And in the sterile, high-stakes world of corporate politics, the truth often had to be unearthed, piece by painstaking piece. Chad had made a critical mistake. He'd underestimated the quiet analyst in the meticulously organized cubicle. He'd seen my dedication to detail as a weakness, not as the foundation of my strength. He'd assumed that because I didn't crave the spotlight, I wouldn't fight for the truth. He was wrong. I didn't make the edits, Chad demanded. Instead, I did something else. I opened my laptop, my fingers moving with a practiced calm that belied the storm brewing within me. I navigated to the shared network drive where the Zenith Innovations Q3 report resided. I opened it, then I didn't save my changes. I didn't overwrite the original. I did something far more interesting. I accessed the document's version history. It was a digital tapestry of every change, every modification, every contribution. Each save point, each edit, meticulously logged. And there, buried amongst the mundane updates, was the digital ghost of Chad's red pen. His strategic edits, his smoothings, his recalibrations, all laid bare for anyone with the eyes to see. It was a digital fingerprint, an irrefutable record of his attempted manipulation. This was my secret weapon, the digital legacy of my meticulous work, waiting to be discovered. I started creating a new document, a clean, pristine copy of my original Q3 report. Then, side by side, I opened the version history log. I began to painstakingly cross-reference, to document. I'd take a screenshot of Chad's egregious alteration, then I'd capture the timestamp and the specific change he made. I meticulously noted where he'd tried to inflate numbers, where he'd replaced factual analysis with buzzwords, where he'd even tried to subtly shift the blame for a minor underperformance onto a junior analyst, a move designed to further solidify his own perceived superiority. It was like assembling a puzzle, except each piece was a digital lie waiting to be exposed. My hands were steady. My mind was clear. I wasn't angry, not yet. I was focused. I was building a case. Chad thought he was playing chess. He'd made his move, a bold, arrogant strike. But he didn't realize I was playing a different game entirely. A game of meticulous documentation, of digital forensics, of knowing that in the corporate world, the truth, like a stubborn stain, always leaves a mark. As the office lights outside, my cubicle began to dim, signaling the end of the official workday. I was still there, bathed in the blue light of my monitor. The hum of the office had faded, replaced by the soft whir of my laptop's fan. I was alone, but I wasn't lonely. I was building my arsenal. Chad thought he'd silenced me, made me look incompetent. He'd succeeded only in writing the first chapter of his own downfall, and I was about to type the final damning sentence. The clock ticked past 7 p.m. The office was a tomb, but for me it was a laboratory, and I was just getting started. The version history of that report wasn't just a record of edits, it was a confession, and I was about to make sure everyone read it. The silence in the office was profound, a pregnant pause before the storm. Chad was likely celebrating his perceived victory, probably already planning his next power play. He was basking in the illusion of competence, unaware that he'd just handed me the blueprint for his demolition. I closed my laptop, the click echoing in the quiet space. I didn't feel defeated. I felt like a coiled spring. He wanted a report that sang. I was about to give him a symphony of his own undoing. The real work, the satisfying work, was about to begin. The hum of the Sterling Corp building was no longer a sterile drone. It had become a discordant symphony of growing unease. Chad Sterling, VP of Strategic Initiatives, was basking in the glow of his perceived victory. The Q3 Zenith Innovations Report, a gleaming testament to his visionary leadership, a vision that Alex had diligently refused to help fabricate. But Alex hadn't been idle in the days following Chad's clumsy sabotage. While Chad was busy strategizing his next triumphant power play, Alex was meticulously building a fortress of evidence, each digital breadcrumb a precisely placed brick. My apartment, usually a sanctuary of quiet order, had transformed into a war room. The meticulously organized bookshelf background on my desktop was replaced by a dual monitor setup, one displaying a complex web of chronologically ordered emails, the other a stark, unforgiving spreadsheet. Each entry was meticulously documented, the exact timestamp of a file modification, the specific changes made, the original content, the substituted jargon, and the chilling contextual detail, who requested it and in what tone. This was not just about proving alterations, it was about building an airtight case. I'd painstakingly gathered every email exchange with Chad regarding the Zenith report, every early draft saved on my personal cloud storage, and even casual messages from former colleagues that hinted at Chad's aggressive management style and his penchant for taking credit. I cross-referenced these with the company's internal communication logs, creating a damning timeline of his attempts to steer the narrative. It wasn't just about proving he'd altered the report, it was about demonstrating the intent, the pattern of manipulation, and his direct disregard for factual accuracy. I created a secure, encrypted folder, a digital vault, accessible only by a complex passphrase that was an amalgamation of significant dates and obscure literary references, a lock only I could pick. Inside, I organized the evidence into distinct categories. Q3 Zenith Report, version history tampering, executive correspondence, verbal orders and evasive tactics, and witness corroboration, anecdotal evidence of behavior. The sheer volume of proof was overwhelming, yet satisfyingly concrete. Chad had thought his digital fingerprints were easily smudged, his ambition a shield against scrutiny. He'd underestimated the power of an analyst who treated every keystroke as a potential exhibit. His arrogance had been his undoing, his reliance on superficial edits, assuming that the absence of an overt protest meant complicity. The first ripple of disruption, the first tremor in Sterling Corp's meticulously constructed facade, began subtly. A critical client presentation for Sterling Corp's second largest account, a European tech firm called Novatech, was scheduled for Tuesday. The presentation was based on market projections Alex had meticulously compiled and analyzed over the past year, but Alex wasn't there. The analyst tasked with stepping in, a junior named Sarah, who was still learning the ropes, found herself drowning in incomplete data and unfamiliar analytical frameworks. The report Alex had prepared, a comprehensive deep dive into market penetration and competitive analysis, was nowhere to be found in its refined state. The version Sarah was given was an earlier, less polished draft, missing key insights and the nuanced conclusions Alex had painstakingly crafted. By Wednesday morning, the office grapevine was buzzing. Texts from panicked former colleagues, once friends who now viewed me with a mixture of fear and morbid fascination, started to ping my personal phone. Alex, what's going on? Sarah's freaking out about the Novatech deck. Apparently, the numbers don't make sense. Did you leave in a hurry? Dave's looking for the Q3 Zenith analysis. Said something about a major discrepancy in projections? Rumor is Chad is furious. He's calling people on your old team asking about missing files. He seems stressed. The stressed part was a gross understatement. I pictured Chad, his expensive suit a little rumpled, his usually immaculate hair slightly disheveled, his smile finally cracking under the pressure of an invisible opponent. He had gambled on my silence, on my fear of reprisal. He'd forgotten that silence, when armed with truth, can be deafening. The official channels, of course, were more formal. An internal email from HR, a terse and impersonal message, requested my immediate return to the office to discuss outstanding matters regarding project continuity. It was the corporate equivalent of a subpoena, but I didn't respond. My personal email, however, received a different kind of communication, a frantic, almost pleading email from a senior partner at Zenith Innovations, a woman named Miss Anya Sharma. Alex, we received the Q3 report. While we appreciate the timeliness, there seem to be significant discrepancies in the projected ROI figures and several key performance indicators that don't align with our internal data. Our finance team is flagging this as a major concern. Could you please clarify these points as soon as possible? This is time sensitive. The time sensitive was the hook. Chad's attempt to paint me as incompetent had inadvertently created a genuine, urgent problem for Sterling Corp. He'd tried to sabotage my reputation, but in doing so, he'd endangered a crucial client relationship. The version of the report he championed, the one devoid of my critical analysis and filled with his hollow platitudes, was now in the hands of a discerning client, and it was raising red flags. I didn't reply to Miss Sharma either. Not yet. I let the unease simmer. I knew Chad would be scrambling, trying to salvage the situation, likely by attempting to spin the discrepancies as a minor miscommunication or an unforeseen market fluctuation. He'd be pointing fingers, blaming the report's inherent complexities rather than admitting his own butchery. My counterplay wasn't a single explosive move. It was a precisely timed series of actions, each designed to escalate the pressure without revealing my full hand. The first domino had fallen with the Novatech presentation's failure. The second was the Zenith Innovations inquiry. The third was subtle, yet profoundly disruptive. I accessed my personal cloud storage and opened a document titled Sterling Corp Critical Infrastructure Dependencies. I had compiled this years ago, a personal project born from a deep understanding of the company's operational backbone. It detailed every system, every crucial vendor, every single point of failure that Sterling Corp relied upon, often without explicit documentation. And I knew, with chilling certainty, that Chad's streamlining initiatives had likely involved consolidating IT support and reducing external vendor oversight, creating vulnerabilities. With a few carefully selected keystrokes, I triggered a minor, non-damaging disruption. It wasn't a full system shutdown, nothing that would cause irreparable harm or immediate financial loss. Instead, I subtly initiated a series of cascading automated security alerts across Sterling Corp's internal network, tied to an outdated server that had been slated for decommissioning for months, but thanks to a loophole in the IT change management protocol, a loophole I had documented, was still technically active. The alerts were designed to mimic a sophisticated, albeit low-level cyber threat. It wasn't malicious. It was diagnostic. It was a way of showing them that their infrastructure under this new disruptive leadership was less secure than a sieve. The alerts, triggered by an obscure protocol that only someone with intimate knowledge of Sterling Corp's legacy systems would understand, sent IT into a mild frenzy. Help desk tickets flooded in. The IT manager, a man perpetually overwhelmed, was now tasked with diagnosing an issue that had no real immediate threat, but which looked terrifyingly like a breach. I imagined the scene: Chad, blindsided by the Novatech presentation's fallout, now bombarded with urgent alerts from the IT department. His veneer of control would be cracking. He'd demand answers, and his team would likely point to the lack of proper oversight, the missing documentation, the absence of the very person who had meticulously cataloged every single potential vulnerability, me. By the end of Wednesday, the atmosphere at Sterling Corp was palpably tense. The whispers of Alex's departure had escalated to panicked murmurs about system failures and client dissatisfaction. Chad's triumphant march had been halted, replaced by a frantic scramble to plug leaks in a ship he himself had sprung. He had tried to sink me, but he'd only managed to scuttle himself. The company, and more importantly the board, were starting to realize that streamlining had come at a cost, and that cost was far greater than anyone had anticipated. They knew something was wrong, profoundly wrong, but they had no idea that the source of their growing distress was the quiet analyst they'd tried to erase, and that the real counterplay was only just beginning. The silence from my end was no longer a passive absence. It was a deliberate, calculated vacuum, and Sterling Corp was beginning to suffocate in it. The tremors from Part 2 had evolved into a full-blown earthquake. The Novatech presentation had been a disaster, leading to a formal complaint and a significant pause in partnership discussions. The Zenith Innovations report, flagged by their finance team, had triggered a review that was quickly uncovering the extent of the data manipulation. And the IT department, still reeling from the phantom cyber threat, was facing increased scrutiny from the board about their security protocols. Chad Sterling, once the picture of arrogant confidence, was reportedly a man on the verge of a nervous breakdown, his disruptive strategies now looking suspiciously like catastrophic incompetence. My phone rang on Thursday morning. It was an unfamiliar number, but I recognized the exchange. I let it ring twice before answering, my voice deliberately calm. "Alex Vance speaking?" A strained, clipped voice responded, "Miss Vance, this is Robert Stern, General Counsel for Sterling Corp. I need to speak with you immediately regarding your departure and the Zenith Innovations project." His tone was a thinly veiled attempt at authority, layered with an almost palpable desperation. "Mr. Stern," I replied, my voice even, my departure was not voluntary, and regarding the Zenith Innovations project, I believe my documentation will provide all necessary clarifications. He sputtered for a moment, clearly not expecting such a direct, unyielding response. "Documentation? Ms. Vance, we're facing significant client concerns. Your previous supervisor, Mr. Sterling, has been unable to provide satisfactory explanations for the discrepancies in the report he inherited." He hesitated, the unspoken implication hanging heavy. The report he inherited from you? Mr. Sterling was provided with the accurate, thoroughly analyzed report. I stated, my voice unwavering. Any subsequent alterations were made without my knowledge or consent, and I have a complete record of those changes. Stern's voice dropped, the professional veneer cracking. "Look, Miss Vance, we understand there may have been misunderstandings. The board is extremely concerned. They're talking about contractual obligations, about potential litigation. We need you to come in. We need to resolve this. We're prepared to discuss terms." Terms. The word hung in the air, a lifeline thrown to a drowning man. I knew this was the moment. The trap was sprung, and they were starting to feel the bite. They thought they were negotiating for a lost report. They had no idea I was holding the keys to their entire corporate citadel. "Terms," I echoed, a slow smile spreading across my face. "Mr. Stern, Sterling Corp attempted to frame me for incompetence and sabotage my career. That's not a misunderstanding. That's a deliberate act of malice." I paused, letting the weight of my words settle. However, I am a professional. I believe in resolving matters fairly, but that fairness must be rooted in truth and accountability. The conversation that followed was a delicate dance, a high-stakes negotiation where I held all the cards. I agreed to a meeting, but not at Sterling Corp. We met at a neutral, sterile conference room in a downtown business center, a place devoid of personal history, a space designed for objective discussion. Chad Sterling was notably absent, a silent testament to his diminished standing. Robert Stern was there, along with the head of legal, a stern-faced woman named Eleanor Vance, no relation, thankfully, and two formidable-looking individuals who I presumed were security or, more likely, the silent enforcers of corporate power. I arrived precisely on time, carrying a single, slim binder. It contained printouts of key emails, screenshots of version histories, and a detailed timeline. But the real weapon, the one that would decide the fate of Sterling Corp, was on my encrypted USB drive. "Miss Vance," Stern began, attempting to regain control, "we want to address the situation. We understand there might have been some communication breakdowns. The board is willing to offer a severance package that reflects your years of service, and we'd like to facilitate a smooth transition. I opened my binder, not to a specific document, but to a blank page. Mr. Stern, Miss Vance, I'm not here to discuss severance. I'm here to discuss accountability. I placed the binder on the table, then reached into my bag and produced the USB drive. You see, I began, my voice calm and measured. When you tried to frame me, you left a rather extensive paper trail, a digital paper trail, to be precise. The version history of the Zenith Innovations Q3 report isn't just a record of edits, it's a confession. And it clearly shows Mr. Sterling's direct involvement in falsifying data, inflating projections, and intentionally distorting critical insights. Furthermore, his subsequent attempts to cover his tracks, his desperate inquiries, and his complete inability to explain the discrepancies to Zenith Innovations have put Sterling Corp in a precarious position. They are threatening legal action and, as you know, have temporarily suspended all ongoing projects with us. Eleanor Vance, the head of legal, narrowed her eyes. We have our own internal findings, Miss Vance, and Mr. Sterling has provided his account of the events. And I have Mr. Sterling's email requests, his verbal directives, recorded in my notes, and the timestamps on the report itself, all corroborated by the fact that he cannot produce any logical explanation for the changes. His account is a narrative of self-preservation, not truth. I then slid the USB drive across the polished table. This drive contains everything. The complete version history, every email, every internal communication, and even a compilation of anecdotal evidence from colleagues who can attest to Mr. Sterling's pattern of manipulative behavior. It also contains my analysis of the critical infrastructure vulnerabilities created by his cost-cutting measures, which, I might add, have already led to a significant security alert being triggered in your IT department. Coincidence, I'm sure. Stern's face had paled. Eleanor Vance, however, picked up the drive with a practiced, almost clinical detachment. She plugged it into a secure laptop she'd brought with her. As the files loaded, her expression shifted from stern to one of grave concern. She clicked through folders, her eyes scanning the meticulously organized data. The silence in the room was broken only by the faint click of her mouse. Miss Vance, she said finally, her voice devoid of emotion, this evidence is compelling. The version history is undeniable. The client communications are damning. And the security alerts you triggered have indeed led to an internal investigation that is currently pointing towards significant oversights in network management. She looked at Stern, then back at me. What do you want, Miss Vance? This was it, the endgame. I had two options, and I had rehearsed them both 1,000 times. I have two proposals, I stated, my voice firm. Option A is for Sterling Corp to acknowledge the wrongful termination and the deliberate sabotage of my reputation. This would involve Mr. Chad Sterling's immediate and unconditional resignation, a public statement from the board clearing my name, and a reinstatement of my position as senior report analyst with a significant increase in compensation and responsibilities, including oversight of the Zenith Innovations account and a mandate to rebuild our relationship. I would also expect a formal apology from Mr. Sterling. Stern visibly flinched at the mention of Sterling's resignation. Eleanor Vance, however, remained impassive. And option B, she prompted. Option B, I continued, leaning forward, is for Sterling Corp to refuse my terms. In that scenario, I will be forwarding all the contents of this USB drive to the Securities and Exchange Commission, the relevant industry regulatory bodies, and to every major financial news outlet. I will also be initiating a civil lawsuit for defamation, wrongful termination, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. Furthermore, the information regarding the critical infrastructure vulnerabilities will be disclosed to your key clients and partners, allowing them to make informed decisions about their continued association with Sterling Corp. I let the silence hang heavy with consequence. I watched their faces. Stern was sweating, his carefully constructed composure crumbling. Eleanor Vance, ever the professional, was calculating the fallout, the legal ramifications, the impact on the company's stock price, the inevitable damage to their reputation. The SEC investigation alone, I added, my voice a quiet hum, along with the potential client exodus and the civil lawsuit, would likely lead to bankruptcy. Your stock would plummet. Your reputation would be irreparable. This is not a threat, Mr. Stern, Miss Vance. This is a business decision. Based on the evidence I possess, Sterling Corp would cease to exist in its current form. Stern looked at Eleanor, his eyes wide with panic. Eleanor Vance, after a long moment, closed the laptop containing the USB drive. She looked directly at me, her expression unreadable. "Miss Vance," she said, her voice measured, "we understand your position. This is a serious matter. The board will need to convene immediately to discuss your proposals." The meeting concluded with a promise of a decision within 24 hours. The drive was returned to me, but not before Eleanor Vance made a complete digital copy. They knew I was serious. They knew the stakes. By Friday evening, the call came. It was from the CEO himself, a man I'd rarely interacted with. His voice was strained, a shadow of his usual booming confidence. He confirmed the board's decision. Option A. Chad Sterling was out. His resignation was announced internally as a mutual decision to pursue other opportunities. The public statement cleared my name, acknowledging unfortunate operational errors and a misunderstanding regarding data integrity. I was reinstated, my salary doubled, my title adjusted to Director of Strategic Analytics, with direct reporting to the CEO and a mandate to oversee all critical client accounts. The Zenith Innovations account was mine to mend. The aftermath was swift and decisive. Chad Sterling was escorted from the building that same Friday afternoon, his face a mask of disbelief and humiliation. The news of his downfall spread like wildfire through the industry. Sterling Corp, while bruised, had averted disaster. They had paid a steep price for their arrogance, but they had learned a valuable, albeit painful, lesson. As for me, I walked back into Sterling Corp, not as the quiet analyst, but as someone who had faced down the corporate lions and emerged not only unscathed, but stronger. My meticulously organized workspace was a testament to my resilience. The hum of the office felt different now. No longer a monotonous drone, but a quiet acknowledgement of my presence, my skill, and my unwavering pursuit of truth. I looked out my office window, the city lights twinkling below. It wasn't just about getting my job back or getting revenge. It was about reminding everyone that integrity matters, that details matter, and that the quiet ones, the ones who do the real work behind the scenes, are often the most dangerous when pushed too far. If you enjoyed watching corporate hubris meet its match, if you appreciate a story where meticulous preparation trumps arrogant ambition, consider liking this video and subscribing for more tales of corporate justice. Because in the end, the truth always finds a way to surface, especially when it's been meticulously documented. My story with Sterling Corp was far from over, but the first chapter, the one about being underestimated and unfairly dismissed, was closed. And it closed with a definitive, satisfying period. The legend of Alex Vance, the analyst who weaponized version history, had just begun.